Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining. We're just going to get started here in about a minute. I'm just going to allow some time for folks who are on their way in to join, and then we'll get started with tonight's information session. Okay, I'm seeing about just shy of 20 people in tonight, so we'll get started. If there's anybody else, they can join as we're underway. Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Autumn. I will be facilitating tonight's information session. I'm a communications officer with the city's communications and public engagement team. So we support city departments with public engagement exercises, information sessions, that kind of thing, like tonight's event. So excited to be joined tonight by my colleagues at the city, including Garrett, Tim, Adam, and Jen, as well as Councillor Stephen. We'll be getting to them shortly with a fantastic presentation about the new site alteration bylaw, and then we'll get to some questions from the audience. So I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the land we are meeting on and that the City of Kingston is situated on the traditional homeland of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. We give thanks to these nations for their care and stewardship over the shared land. We acknowledge that some city processes are shaped by colonialism, and we commit as part of this meeting and in any outcomes that flow from it to keep this front of mind and center equity, inclusivity, access, and anti-oppression throughout our work. So tonight's meeting is a presentation format followed by a question and answer. So Garrett will walk you through the important background information on the bylaw. And then following that presentation, we'll throw it over for questions and we'll have the experts field some answers. If you want to ask a question, you can ask it at any point in time during the presentation by using the Q&A feature. It's located just at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. We've got it highlighted in that little graphic there. Like I said, you can type in your question at any point in time. When we get to the Q&A, I will start working through those sequentially, and we'll get to as many questions as we can tonight. When we do get to the Q&A portion as well, if you prefer to ask a question verbally, just hit the raise hand button, and we'll add you to the queue. And when we get to you, we will unmute you, and you'll be able to ask your question. So, with that in mind, I'm going to pass this over to Garrett. Oh, before I do that, just a quick tech note, in case you have any issues with tonight's webinar, the easiest option to troubleshoot 99% of Zoom problems is to log out and log back in. So you can do that through the link that you would have used to join tonight's meeting. If all else fails, we are recording the meeting tonight and it will be available on YouTube, and you can reach out to the project team outside of this as well for questions and answers. Yeah, so Garrett, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Garrett Hoagie. I'm the manager for Development Engineering and Planning Services, which is a group that manages the site alteration bylaw and their processes thereof. So, quick agenda for tonight. We're going to go into quick intro to the project, along with some general changes to the site alteration bylaw. We'll then get into the Reddendale and UR4 zone specific changes that we're recommending as a part of a pilot program for your area. Go over what this means for you as property owners, the next steps for the consultation period, and then into a question and answer period. Next slide there. So why are we changing the bylaw? The site alteration bylaw has not seen any updates since its original inaction in 2008. Over this last number of years, we've seen many changes to our processes, both internally and to government legislation, that have caused some issues with our current bylaw. We've also seen some larger changes to development styles in the city of Kingston overall. Why specifically are we looking at a pilot program in Reddendale and the UR4 zone? I don't think it's a surprise that we are aware that there are stormwater issues within within the UR4 zone and the neighborhood surrounding it. Um, we get consistent resident complaints for both private property and the public realm infrastructure for stormwater issues. It's also one of our most well-established subdivisions, with original development ranging between the 1940s and 1970s. Um, Coming with newer development in the area, we're seeing a slow change in the development styles in these areas, from smaller houses on larger lots, um, to smaller lots and more increased lot coverage, which is contributing to some of the stormwater issues we're seeing. Next slide. So the new site alteration process overall is going to follow a three-permit process. There's going to be a minor site alteration permit, which includes alteration on properties that are less than or equal to 1 hectare in size, and then have less than 1,000 cubic meters of material over a 12-month period entering the site. The fees for these permits are going to be $70 and are going to go for a 1-year term before they lapse. The next set of fees is the major site alteration permits, which is anything not considered in the minor site alteration realm, which is more for larger scale developments. Those are going to see a $500 fee and are going to be open for a 2-year term. Next is our stockpiling site alteration permit, which is major alteration for the purposes of stockpiling, not necessarily for regrading of sites. And it comes with a $750 fee along with a 5-year term. For the purposes of this presentation and the conversation tonight, we're going to be looking mostly at the minor site alteration permit, as this is what's going to be applicable with the pilot program for the UR4 zone. Next slide. Along with this permit process, we're also going to see a change to our building permit process with regards to site alteration. So currently under the building bylaw, all building permits are required to submit a plot plan that includes proposed and existing grades, along with any kind of stormwater features that would be highlighted on the site. The changes to the site alteration bylaw are going to ensure that staff members can review those properly to make sure that they're compliant with the site alteration process, and then will be approved by staff. Once a building permit has been issued with an approved plot plan, we would require that within 2 months of occupancy permits being issued for the property, that a grading certificate will be required to be applied for the site, and that the grade would be in compliance with the approved plot plan. From there, it's going to be the responsibility of property owners to maintain those grades and drainage paths that have been established through the approved plot plan. Next slide, please. So specifically for the Reddendale and the UR4 zone, for the pilot program that we are proposing is a loss of exemptions for the neighborhood through the site alteration bylaw. So generally, there's an exemption for properties that are under 1 hectare in size. So the overall City of Kingston is not going to see use out of the minor site alteration permits, where Reddendale will under this pilot program. So all properties will be required to have a site alteration prior to completing any grading work on their site. The permit process for this would be undertaken that an application, including a grading plan, would be completed by a PN or an OLS would be required prior to any work being completed on site. Once it's been submitted to city staff, we will review it to make sure that it's compliant with the site alteration bylaw. And there will also have to be a review done for potential archaeological clearance. There are very small pockets of archaeological potential within Reddendale that would be required by our heritage team to be addressed during this process. Specific mapping for those is not available, but we are working with our heritage team on the best way to communicate which properties would be more affected by this change. Once the work is completed, we would require property owners to apply for a grading certificate on the site, which includes an as-built survey that shows that the work being done is compliant with the approved plot plan. And then we would review, confirm with an on-site visit, and issued a grading certificate showing that you have complied with the plot plan. Once the grading certificate has been issued, it would be kept on hand at the City of Kingston and be able to be provided to yourself or new owners when they need it. Next slide. So under the pilot program, what are you able to do? So there won't be any changes to anything like gardens, lawn dressing, or maintenance work in lawn care, or things that would be considered minor landscaping under the site alteration permit. You're going to be able to conduct those operations without having to come to us for a permit. Where you would need a permit would be areas that are identified within zero point 0.6 meters of a property line that include changes to either established or natural drainage paths, an increase in overall hardscaping on the property, general changes to grade, uh, landscaping above minor landscaping, and the installation of pools. Next slide, please. So the intent of this pilot program is not meant to be a one-stop shop solution for the stormwater problem in Reddendale. This is a program that's going to be dovetailed with work being completed by our colleagues in engineering services, public works, and utilities Kingston to help the overall issues, and is more being used to make sure that we are facilitating reasonable and responsible site alteration. The term of the pilot program is going to will come into effect with the adoption of the bylaw. And we would be looking at a 2-year period before we come back to council with a report indicating what we've seen over the last 2 years with the pilot program being in place. We will also do semi-annual check-ins internally. So every 6 months, we're going to sit down and review the information over the last 6 months to make sure that it's meeting kind of our goals with the program. Next slide, please. So what are your next steps as residents in Reddendale? So the draft bylaw is up on the website for review right now, and you're going to be able to go in and leave comments directly on the bylaw and provide your input. This session is being hosted now with conjunction of the release of the bylaw to make sure that your area, which is going to be specially affected compared to others, is going to have ample time to review the bylaw and provide these comments. We also have another general information session coming up April 1st, which is going to go over more of the broader changes to the bylaw that might not affect your neighborhood as much, or with the adoption of the pilot program, and would be more better information for those that aren't within the UR4 zone. So there is an opportunity for changes to be made to the bylaw based off these public comments. So this is a proposal in a draft. We're presenting it based off of comments that we've received from property owners based on complaints with grading and drainage throughout the neighborhood. And this is not a set in stone project that we're expecting to be that we are going to be forcing through. We want to hear from you as residents on whether or not you think this program is appropriate and if this is something you would support. So there's definitely an opportunity before the bylaw goes to council, and especially over the next 4 weeks, to provide those comments on what your thoughts are for the pilot program. The adoption of the bylaw, we are looking to go to council with a report May 19th for adoption. So with the next 4 weeks, we'll have ample time once comments are received to be able to put together recommended changes to our draft based on the comments that we're receiving over the next 4-week consultation period. So that's it for our general presentation. I'm happy to sit and answer any questions. If there's any information that you guys need more, I'm here to answer those.
Thanks, Garrett. So I'm just gonna throw a quick reminder out there. If you can, drop your questions in the QA question answer feature there, just at the bottom, and we'll start working through them. I've got a couple questions populating in there now, and another quick reminder that Jen has dropped in a link to the web page for the site alteration bylaw, which has a copy of the bylaw there, which you can provide direct comments on or reach out to staff about. Okay, so the first question, I think, uh, we have the first question in here is when is the pilot project in effect? And what if a homeowner already has a contract in place with a landscaper prior to the date? So I think the first half has been answered, but if you want to reiterate that and take that second half there.
Yeah, so the pilot program is going to be potentially will be in effect. Just looking at dates here. If we go to May 19th, we'd be looking at May 21st for a third reading of the bylaw. So should we hit that counted to May 19th, we would be looking at May 23rd. In regards to whether or not someone has a contract, if work has not started prior to the bylaw being put in place, there would have to be a permit involved.
Thank you. We have another one coming in. So I'm unclear about the problem that this is trying to solve. If the issue is larger houses on smaller lots, perhaps the restriction should be on the size of the houses and not the grade of the lot. It would seem to me that any grading work would route water away from the house, which should be in line with the city's goals. I'm unclear why grading is being targeted here.
So grading is being targeted here specifically because we want to make sure that homeowners are routing water away from their homes, but also not directing it on neighboring properties. We want to make sure that our municipal infrastructure is being used. We do see a lot of complaints come in for properties that have um, potentially low points in their backyard. They've got water pooling where they want to fill it in and they provide a grade change of a meter, meter and a half, and then end up forcing that water on neighboring properties. Um, that's more of what we want to avoid here. The We don't want to look at restricting the size of houses, but allow want to allow people still to build the houses they want, but make sure that the grading that work is being taken on place on the property is responsible.
Thanks, Garrett. We've got one. I'm just going to jump into the chat. We've got a couple questions that have come in through there as well. So, how would you define minor landscaping versus landscaping, and do you have examples?
So minor landscaping is a defined term under the new bylaw. Um, So minor landscaping means yard maintenance activities, lawn dressing, installation of at-grade or raised flower beds and vegetable gardens, installation of walkways or pathways, and similar landscaping features on residential properties that do not adversely alter an existing drainage system approved by the city, a stormwater management facility, an easement in favor of the city, or alter the grade zero point 0.6 meters from the property line, but does not include the installation or removal of retaining walls and the installation of in-ground pools. So that can be found directly in the bylaw posted on the website.
Okay, we got two comments that I think are follow-ups on this. So the first one asks, what about the driveways?
So driveways are taken into account more under our right-of-way bylaws. So you need entrance permits for driveways, and we have zoning that restricts the width of driveways. As for changing from like if you've got an unpaved driveway that you want to pave, we're not going to require you to get an site alteration permit in order to pave a driveway.
Uh, Comment here saying that the Everett Point properties already have restricted covenants on them to cover this.
So we can't make comment any restrictive covenants on properties. We're not involved in that process. And even though some might, not all do.
Okay. A question about the study work that's been done, asking what studies have been done in Reddendale on stormwater, which would properly inform the permit process.
So we haven't undertaken any additional studies for stormwater within the Reddendale area as a part of this review. Um, we've more looked into what other municipalities are using as tools to help in these areas, and a more restrictive permitting process has been used by many municipalities in order to help curb some of the issues we see in these areas.
Switching back over to the Q&A. And just for anybody watching, the Q&A tool makes it a little bit easier for us to make sure that we're tracking every question, answering them in sort of a as received order. So I know it might be a little bit of a pain, but if you wouldn't mind trying to use that, it's easier for us to keep track of everything. So we have a question here. I understand the fees associated with the permit have been given consideration to the additional costs associated with an updated survey, plus or minus $5,000, and a grading plan by an engineer, plus or minus $5,000. Will a simple landscape plan with accurate measurements be accepted, or will the drawings have to be completed by an engineer or a landscape architect?
So as a part of this process, and which is consistent with our current site alteration process for larger properties, we're going to require it to be completed by a professional. Understanding that there are additional costs to start, we see ranging anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 for a grading plan completed by a PNG or an OLS. We can look into the application of a landscape architect, which can help us maybe some of what you're asking about for landscaping companies where they might have that involved.
Thanks. Okay, so the next one we have, what about properties that currently direct stormwater onto neighboring properties?
So the bylaw is not going to be able to help with any properties that are any work that's been done previously. So we're not going to be able to apply this retroactively. Under our current policies, we require that property owners talk to each other to sort out these issues, and the city does not get involved in these drainage disputes at this time.
Another question here on the study background. So last year, many holes were made in the neighborhood with green square posts. They appeared to me to be monitoring for water level. Can you tell us anything about that study?
So I'm not aware of the study that you're speaking of. It could be related to some capital works that we have in the area.
Okay, at this time I don't have any other questions in the queue, so I'll just throw it back out to the crowd tonight. Does anybody else have any questions? Got one, got them coming in now. Thank you. So when does the city clear out culverts for proper drainage to happen?
So this is a question that is more likely better answered by colleagues in Public Works.
Mm,
The best way if you need culverts cleared out around your properties is to submit a service request through CRM, to have it assigned to our Public Works team that's going to be able to go out and clean out these culverts. Um, Public Works is also looking at taking on more active monitoring within the area so that it can help with some of the issues that are being seen.
thanks. Another one, what is the expected permit timeline for the permit process? And how long will it take for the city to review each drawing and the application?
So our turnaround for these kind of reviews are generally pretty short. We look for about a 2-week timeline to get comments back. Obviously, depending on how much, how many permits we get at a time would could elongate that process, but we expect it to be a 2-week turnaround for a simple permit.
This one coming out of the chat. If you do not have a stormwater study that has been to determine volumes, flows, drainage patterns, and the impacts of excessive development and large volumes of water introduced in the neighborhood from sump pits, then what tools are you going to use to assess a permit application?
For these smaller site alteration permits, we are generally going to review them similar to the way that we would for building permits, which we're not looking at potentially having people do a stormwater management report in order to be able to fully look at what the exact flows are for the property. The idea is that we at least want to make sure that there's positive drainage from their buildings towards a rear or side yard swale that can direct it to municipal infrastructure rather than neighboring properties.
Thank you. And Jen's thrown the details about how to submit a service request in there, so please do if there are any culvert issues. Following up, we've got another question through Q&A. So I'm generally supportive of less policy rather than more. If I'm understanding correctly, the rationale for this change is that people are complaining about water drainage issues rather than an environmental goal or other. If this is the case, can these disputes be resolved with other mechanisms rather than a blanket bylaw? This seems like a blunt tool to use here.
So the alternative, the alternative in this situation for grading that happens outside of a building permit is for the city to basically step out and it's a civil dispute. We don't have a mechanism right now that lets us get involved when people are trying to complete grading outside of the existing building permit process. So there's not a tool the city can use to be able to get involved and help monitor this. Um, it's essentially pushing it back onto property owners to handle themselves.
Thank you. Um, do another call out to see if anybody has any questions that they're sitting on or comments from the presentation. Follow up to the previous question. It says, I think that's okay. No need to change. Thank you all for your questions tonight so far. This has been great. Okay, we've got another one in. Will there ever be an overarching plan for stormwater management in Reddendale?
That is a question again that's probably better answered by our engineering services team rather than our planning services team. We are looking at some improvements in the area, and there is going to be, I won't say there's potentially be, but it's not an area that we're just going to ignore, and it's something that is being looked at.
Thank you. Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe if I can just add to that a bit of what Garrett's also said there. I think it's important to remember for an overall stormwater study, that's a larger area that you're looking at, like the whole Reddendale area. And even though Garrett is in what's called development engineering, that is nested within planning services. And they are looking at new development related changes that would result to city infrastructure, if you will, drainage and consumption of water and such. So the overall larger studies are done through our engineering department in conjunction with Public Works and also closely work with UK. So it's difficult for us to comment in this specific topic on uh, larger overall studies. As Garrett said at the beginning of the presentation, the lot grading and just trying to get a better handle on that and an accurate, way to facilitate that when new development takes place is something we can do through planning. And that's what the focus of this really is tonight. And it's really just one piece of the overall puzzle that does feed into the overall larger drainage picture.
Thanks for that extra context, Tim. We've got some follow-up on that. So, a question about how often do you meet with Utilities Kingston and the engineering department about complex issues like the Reddendale neighborhood?
Planning services is not involved in a lot of those capital reconstruction projects or those kind of conversations. So we do not have direct meetings with those teams about these items.
So, and again, maybe just to add a bit of context to that. Yeah, I mean, we do speak with other departments in Utilities Kingston. And again, it tends to be related to new development, new builds, large infill projects, subdivisions, things like that, as opposed to existing infrastructure. If it's existing, there's very little input that the planning department would have on that.
Thank you both. So we have another question. Some areas within the neighborhood have been developed over top of existing drainage water courses. Some homes have excessive water to deal with their sump pumps. Will homeowners be required to store this water on their property, or can it still be drained to a city ditch?
So the whole part of the whole point of doing this process to make sure that this water is being drained to city ditches. There's not an expectation that homeowners are gonna have to deal with all of the water on their own property. We want to see it move towards our municipal infrastructure as a better option.
Thank you. So we have a comment here. I think spending 5K to develop drawings for Kingston to review a project is too much of an ask. There needs to be a lower cost way to provide information about a proposed project.
So that's feedback we can take and look at
Mhm.
for sure. And I'd like to just reiterate again, this is a proposal. We want to make sure we're hearing from you. If it's something that generally the residents of the UR Reddendale and the UR4 zoned areas are not interested in, it's not something that we have to proceed with at this time. So if you are not happy with the program or you think that it's not required or not needed, we want to hear that information because most of what we see is the complaints on improper grading and drainage, and that's what this is in reaction to. So, um, thank you for providing the comment here, but also be very, very appreciative if you can provide that to us and your counselor and to the CRM page so that we have that on record as well.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, and there will be ample time after this presentation to go back and digest the bylaw a little bit more, and if you have any follow-up questions, to reach out. Um, so we have another question. Do they have to drain to a ditch if the lot slopes in the opposite direction?
No, so there's not necessarily going to be a requirement for us to raise the grade of your lot if it's not physically able to get there. It might just limit some of the grading work that you're able to do on your property so that you're not pushing any water that's pooling on your property onto your neighbors.
Okay, I'm just gonna go over to the chat and pull out a couple questions that we've received through here. How would you deal with an application that is responding to improper development next door where grade exceeded finished grade, i.e., the problem with drainage exists because of the neighbor's property failure to adhere to approved finished grade when constructing and not the subject property of an application?
So for the enforcement under what we're proposing in the UR4 zone and broadly across the city is that with building permits under the new process, we would have a approved grading plan that would be provided before the permit is issued. Once the permit is issued, it would come to our team to handle as a site alteration permit. Once an occupancy permit is issued in the property, we would follow up with a boilerplate letter that would require the owner to apply for a lock rating certificate within a 2-month period. If they apply for a lock rating certificate, and if they do not apply for a lock rating certificate, we would proceed under an order to comply and then AMPS um, for our enforcement action. In the case of if they've given us a lock rating certificate that does not match what their current plan is, they would have to complete work in order to either match it to the existing approved plan that's on file, or they would have to alter the plan in such a way that it would still be acceptable to the city of Kingston.
Thanks, Garrett. And just to clarify, AMPs are administrative monetary penalties?
Correct.
Perfect. Got a couple more, sorry, excuse me. We've got a couple more questions coming in through the Q&A. So, question about drainage direction. Oh, no, sorry, we covered that one. Sorry. Question about enforcement again. Are you going to enforce a grading security deposit?
For the minor site alteration permits approved with the pilot program, in order to try and keep some of the costs down for applicants, um, we wouldn't require a deposit under these permits so that you're not going to have to put down additional monies. But we would be able to use the AMP process to make sure that that properties are graded correctly. Under a building permit, we have the ability to take lock rating securities at the beginning of the building permit to help with some of those items.
Thank you. We have another one here. This is about the complaints that we've received. Are the complaints about existing problems or potential problems?
We get complaints about both. During the development process, we can get complaints from neighboring property owners about their unhappiness about the development that's happening. But we also have quite a few complaints about existing problems that are actually happening and not just potential problems.
Thank you. I'll put another call out to see if anybody has any other questions that they're sitting on. Appreciate the time that everybody's taken this evening to spend with us from near and far. So we've got a new question coming in. What is the current policy for increased grading of properties?
So there is not a current policy that allows us to limit grading of properties. As it stands with the existing site alteration bylaw, all properties are exempt from the bylaw if they are under 1 hectare in size, or if there's a building permit on the property. The changes that we're proposing to the bylaw will allow us to get involved with building permits and in processes outside of building permits. So as for policy for increased grading, there isn't any that we can really enforce. We have some good neighbor guidelines that provide some recommendations on how properties should be graded, but there's nothing that allows us to actively get involved.
Thanks for that. Another one coming in. So what standards/criteria will the city use to assess if a proposed grade change is approved or not?
So as a part of our approval process, we're going to review to make sure that again that there's positive drainage in the correct areas. So we don't want to see an increase of grade that's going to potentially make it worse for neighboring properties by directing water in that area. We're going to want to see that properties are graded in such a manner that water is either being maintained well on site or being brought towards the city infrastructure so that it can be disposed of properly through our systems. Um, Part of the reason to help us assess this is to have that plan provided by an engineer that's stamped, which lets us have a little more surety that there's professional eyes looking at it from the external side as well.
Thank you. I'll put another call out to see if anybody has any questions. And just as I finish saying that, Jen has dropped the Good Neighbor Guide in the chat, just in case anybody is interested in reading the document that Garrett had just referenced. And we've got another question. Will examples be provided for approved plans and the standards that you require?
Yes, so we actually have a couple standard lock rating that's provided through the subdivision guidelines that we use on developer level. So we are going to be moving this into be used as part of the site alteration bylaw as an example of what you can do for properties for work on your property. We're also putting together a companion guideline for the site alteration bylaw that's going to help explain the processes and what we're requiring on a less legal and technical level so that general residents are able to review and understand. So that's also going to include more of these examples of approved plans or standards that we're going to expect for these lock rating for these site alteration permits and lock rating certificates.
Thank you. Question about soil. Any policies on changing soil or where they see directing their stormwater?
So for changes in direction of stormwater and change in soil are generally governed by more provincial guidelines like the OREG 40619 for excess soil reuse, which talks to what material you're allowed to bring to a site. And changes to direction of stormwater is more to the Drainage Act. We're going to provide some more requirements of what we want to see for direction of stormwater, like in most cases towards a municipal infrastructure, so they can be taken care of. But we're not going to have specific policies on like restricting soil types if that is what you're asking there.
Thanks, Garrett. And just confirming, Rose, if that answer didn't cover everything, please let us know and we'll follow up with some more detail there. I'm not seeing any other question. Oh, every time I say that, it's the magic words. So a question here, what happens if the ground has sunk over time and the owner wants to bring it back up to level, i.e., around the foundations of a house? Will this type of repair be treated in the same manner as the change in drainage of the lot? And a follow-up, what size of addition to an existing building would trigger the bylaw requirements?
So fixing grade of properties around a foundation would be considered more of a minor landscaping under a yard maintenance activity. So you're not necessarily changing overall grading of your site. You're just making sure that the soil around your house is not going to be directing any water towards your foundation and instead away. So that's not where we're really worried about with these kind of items, and that's where the minor landscaping comes into effect. For the size of addition, so when we're looking at work within building permits, we generally try and look at it in a logical sense that like if you're increasing the size of your property if you're increasing the size of your building to a point that you need an additional building permit, we're going to need you to provide some sort of lock rating that shows that you are directing that water correctly. In the case of either a small shed off the side of the house, we're going to look at it, and if there is not overall site grading changes, we are not necessarily going to want to get involved under a site alteration permit.
Hey, Tim, yeah.
Yeah, just to sort of add to what Garrett's already said there, because the latter part of that question was what size of addition to an existing building would trigger a bylaw requirement. So bylaw requirements are triggered when setbacks from property lines, building heights, coverage are not do not meet the bylaw standard for the zone. That also applies to landscaping requirement, widths of driveways, things like that. Those are all performance standards that are unique to each zone in the city. And once you go outside of those, variant outside of those, that's when you require a zoning bylaw amendment or a committee of adjustment minor variance. So if the addition to a house didn't require any variances to the zoning bylaw, it wouldn't go through the zoning bylaw process. It would likely still have to go through a site alteration review, depending on the extent of it, and the location of it. But that's something that would be reviewed when the building permit comes in.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, so we have another question in through Q&A. You're not relying on city staff to inspect. You will be shifting the liability to the engineer to verify and inspect.
City staff are still going to be inspecting and reviewing that the work is being done and that the plan is actually correct. There is going to be a portion of liability shifted to the engineer that's stamping the plan and is responsible to make sure that that is done correctly. But we're going to review it from a grading stormwater aspect to make sure that what they're providing is correct and meets the requirements that we're looking for and aligns with the overall grading and drainage in the subdivision.
Question about applicability here. So is the bylaw being proposed limited to Reddendale, or is the same bylaw to apply to the entire city?
So portions of the bylaw are being changed for the entire city. Portions of the bylaw are being changed for specifically Reddendale. For site alteration, for more of a review of site alteration during building permits, that's being applied citywide. So we are going to make sure that grading plans that are given as part of a building permit are going to be enforceable at a citywide level. For Reddendale specifically, we are looking at it as a pilot program for the more enhanced site alteration bylaw, which is removing the exemption of properties less than 1 hectare in size.
Thanks. So a question about the pilot status. Does that mean it would be withdrawn after 2 years as a pilot program?
Not necessarily. So at the end of the 2-year program, we're going to take a report to council that's going to recommend one of 3 options. It's either going to be an alteration to the program, a repealment of the program, or an expansion of the program. So depending on what we see over the period, it could be repealed, it could be kept. We're just going to have to see what happens over the next 2 years.
Thank you for that. Just want to see if there's any other questions. Don't have any sitting in the queue right now. Does anybody have any questions they're unsure about asking, or covered a lot of ground this evening? Give it another couple minutes just to see. Wendy, I know you had wanted to say a few words. Would now work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Autumn.
No worries.
First off, thanks to all the city staff who are here this evening. Really, really appreciate you taking the time out to do this work for us. To everyone who's here from Reddendale, thank you so much for being here. You've had some really thoughtful questions and ideas and things to poke at. And I think that's really, really important, because if we want good policy, we need to attack it from all angles with all different perspectives. One of the things I want to encourage you to think about as you take the next couple weeks to maybe look over the bylaw, consider, is this something I want? Is this something I don't want? There's kind of 2 sides to this coin the way I see it. One side is, if I am a property owner and I want to redevelop my property, how does this bylaw impact me? And the flip side of that is, if my neighbor wants to redevelop their property, how could that impact me? So there are kind of pros and cons on both sides of the argument. And so this is where, we really truly want to hear from you, your neighbors, the community, because this whole project, like this is coming forward because of the concerns that staff and I have been hearing about what's going on in Reddendale. So to comment just more broadly, there is a larger stormwater engineering thing happening within the engineering department. More information will be coming about that, but there is work that will be done in 2026. So again, nobody likes construction, but we need it done to make sure that we're taking care of that. So this site alteration bylaw piece is potentially an important part of the puzzle. If the community says we don't want this, like Garrett said at the beginning, no one's going to force it. But this is a tool that we're presenting as an option that may be useful in either protecting your own property or protecting your neighbors and things like that. So Autumn, I'll put it back over to you. I think there's another question, but everyone, thank you so much for your time, and please do take a look at that bylaw and send in your feedback. It is important, and it will be read.
Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, we do have another question. So, are we allowed to install drainage and to drain stormwater away from our property to the culverts without the permits?
Under the changes to the bylaw with removing the exemptions for this area, no, you wouldn't be able to do the work without a permit. Obviously, if you are going to be coming in to look to direct stormwater towards our system, that's something we're looking for, and the permit will definitely be in a more easy area to be approved, but you would still require to come in for a permit.
Thank you. And yes, thank you for the questions. They've been very detailed, very, very good for policy discussion. Just give it a moment to see if anybody else has any. We've got a bit more time here if anybody would like to ask any questions. So we have another one that's come in. Ultimately, does this not mean that Reddendale residents will be bearing the burden of additional development costs for 2 years, that everyone else in the city avoids this responsibility? The city has already has the power and obligation to police grade compliance under legislation governing building permits.
So the work that's being done outside of building permits and generally grading the building permits, from what we've had conversations with the building department, is that it's not applicable law under the building code. So we're not able to enforce that well under the existing building permits. The changes overall are going to build in a process that lets us do that really well to enforce grading during the building permit process to make sure people comply with the approved grading plans in the property. But as it stands with these areas, especially with the grading that's happening outside of building permits, once they've been closed and the city's moved on from that area, we then have work that's being done that we can't get involved with.
Another follow-up, or sorry, a separate question. It appears the permit process has many steps, each one costly. Any estimate of the expected cost of the permit process from start to finish in both time and money?
Yeah, so we've kept the permit cost itself fairly low. It's a $70 fee. In regards to the actual work involved, if you are not in an area that potentially has some archaeological potential, we're looking at anywhere from $2,500 to $5,000 for a permit process. The grading plans that we see completed, we see generally are in that mark. And that's really the only thing that's going to be required as a part of the minor site alteration permit process.
Anything about time? Sort of the
Oh,
timeline on
sorry.
that permit? Yeah, no, it's okay.
Generally, our review times for our first set of comments is about 2 weeks. And then there it kind of depends on what the scale of comments are and what the scale of comments are and how fast it takes you to get back with that. But we generally ask that the first review give us 2 weeks to get your responses, and then each review after that is about a week, depending on workloads.
Thank you. So we got another question here about the complaints that we've received. So how will city staff deal with neighbors that are just troublesome with complaints that are not valid? Will the city put it back on them to prove that an issue exists, or how do they do that? A little bit about our investigation process.
Yeah, so with the guide that we're looking to put out as a companion to this, we're going to talk to when people should be looking at reporting stormwater issues, and talking about like what is an appropriate amount of time for water to appear. And we're going to talk more in that about when it's appropriate to have conversations with us in situations broadly throughout the city. It's going to be, we're not going to get involved unless there's a an existing approved plot plan. In the areas with Reddendale, with the if the pilot program is forward and the exemptions are removed, any changes in grade we would have to look at under the site alteration bylaw.
Thank you. So is there an appeal process if an owner disagrees with any requirement for remediation by the city?
Yeah, so we have the ability to deny the permit. If it gets denied, there's an appeal process where you can go to council and ask for council to approve it instead. So that is our appeal process through the bylaw.
Thank you. Just looking to see if we've had any questions come in. I'm not seeing any. Okay, so question following up on the grade compliance. So the courts have, sorry, Garrett, but the courts have said squarely that the city is obligated to monitor grade compliance and avoidance of adverse impacts on neighboring properties, regardless of whether there is a site alteration bylaw in force. That is just an additional tool for the city in the development toolbox. It's like more of a comment.
Yeah, I'm maybe going to say I think that looks to me more like a comment, and I don't think we're really in a position to comment on court rulings.
Are berms considered grading?
Yes, the grading work that we're looking at under the bylaw would be anything that is not minor landscaping.
Um, could you confirm the expected start date for the neighborhood bylaw?
So we're looking at taking it to council for May 19th. So based on the three readings required for the bylaw, the first two readings would happen on May 19th if it's adopted. And then should they be looking to adopt it, the third reading would happen the following council meeting on June 2nd. I believe I said May 21st to start, but that was an error. It's June 2nd.
Um, follow up on the appeal process there. Asking about if council does not vary the decision, is there an appeal beyond that?
We do not have an appeal process built in the site alteration bylaw beyond the final council decision.
Perfect. Okay. I'm gonna throw another call out to see if there's any more general questions. I think we're getting quite into the weeds on the appeal process a little bit. I'll take one more on that, and then I'll ask any follow-ups on those topics be directed through the CRM contact us. We can more adequately discuss some of those through that process. So, would you consider building in an appeal process?
That's definitely something that we can take back and look at.
Mhm.
We can consider in conjunction with what we do for other bylaws, and if maybe that this situation needs a bit of a more robust appeal process based on comments from the public.
All right. See if there's any other questions waiting in the wings. And a reminder too that we'll be hosting another event on this bylaw on April 1st. So if something comes up between now and then, or if you want a refresher, there will be that opportunity as well later this month. I guess, sorry, next month, technically. It feels like the end of this month. I'll do another last call for questions.
Autumn, just while we're waiting, I just want to mention as well, I have an email newsletter and you've given me some great ideas for some topics to cover and explore in the next issue. I'm going to put the link in the chat here. So if you are not signed up and you are interested in signing up for my email newsletter, please do. It's free, of course. So I'll just leave the link there if you're interested.
Thank you. All right. Maybe I'll give it another minute or two, see if anybody has any questions sort of sitting on the back burner there. And if not, we could wrap this knowing that there's ample opportunity if something occurs to you after the meeting, please reach out. Through Get Involved, we have the document available. It's hosted in a program called Conveo. This displays the document, and you can click anywhere on the document and provide direct comments. So you can comment on specific paragraphs, specific elements of it. If that's not your preferred method, we can also take comments in through CRM. There's emails listed on the project page that will bring that in. As Garrett and Tim have mentioned, we are very interested in hearing your feedback on this. We appreciate all the time and effort it's taken this evening. Okay. Oh, I'm not seeing any questions coming in. Oh, sorry. I have pooling water from the neighbor's downspout and sump pumps. Who in the city should I reach out to find solutions? Moving
So any situations you'd like maybe some help on, or to see if there's potentially an avenue for us to review, CRM is your best place to go. It can be managed by our comms team to help triage it and get it to the correct place to go.
Great answer. Well, okay. Seeing no more questions at this time. Okay, we've got another one coming in. Sorry, Rose. CRM is our customer relationship management. It just is the system that we use to connect with anybody who, if you write in, if you email in, if you call into the city, it's so that we can triage requests that come in to make sure that they go to the right system. That's on me for using internal terms like we would all know what they mean. So in that case, I'm referring specifically to like the contact us email or get involved Kingston at cityofkingston.ca, which is the other email that connects directly to that system. Any messages sent there are triaged and sent to the appropriate department for follow-up. So we've got another question about landscapers. Have you given any consideration that landscapers may not want to do work in this neighborhood due to extra fees and construction inspections and delays that will be caused during the project?
So we don't really expect there to be potentially landscapers stopping want to do work in the area. The project might have the pilot program will definitely have a more front end, a little bit more of a front end heavy process that's, might add some timeline to the start of a project. But with the inspections overall, we're not expecting like goalpost inspections during the actual alteration process. It'd be that initial review of a plan and then the final inspection to confirm that they are consistent with that plan. So we don't expect it to be too much of a time draw overall on the landscaping process.
And if that is an issue, hopefully it crops up during the engagement on the bylaw. Councillor Stevens dropped the contact us email in there as well for any follow-up questions or comments. I'll just say again, last call for questions because that seems to be the magic word. Anybody? Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any, so if nobody has anything else to add, I think we can wrap it here tonight. Again, I would like to thank you all for joining on a very damp evening. We've got the details on the screen above, and we've linked it to the project page several times in the chat. Yeah, we hope to hear from you, and thank you again for joining us tonight. Take care.